Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm Joel Moore, President and CEO of Charleston Animal Society. We are so glad that Peggy is here. Peggy is a pet trust advocate, an expert actually, pet advocate, a lawyer, a lover of animals her entire lifetime. But she's here tonight to visit with us, with our family, to talk about best practices and planning for our pets should we predecease them. And that is such a prevalent issue in our community, not in our community, but our nation, our country, that a lot of us don't think about. And so we're really going to benefit tonight in hearing from Peggy. But you've been involved in animal welfare and promoting against the plight of animals for your entire lifetime. So share with us your background, because I know everyone's going to be really amazed as much as I was.
I had the unique opportunity to be raised by a man, my dad, John Hoyt, who was the president and CEO of the Humane Society of the United States. You might have heard of them. I was 10 years old when he took that position, and every single book report, presentation, opportunity to speak as an elementary school student right up on through college and law school was some sort of an animal topic. And so I've always been an animal lover. In fact, it was kind of incredulous to me that my dad got the job, because I thought I was the bigger animal lover than he was. But it was perfect for me because I worked there as a child in the summers, and really just got to be around animals all the time and advocate on their behalf, and ultimately ended up I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I took a wrong turn, ended up in law school. And then still wanted to try to find a way to combine my practice of law with my passion for animals. And fortunately, I was in love with the law from an estate planning perspective, and got this crazy idea to write a book about estate planning for people and their pets. Or as I like to say, I do estate planning for pets and their people.
So I think what brought this issue to exposure really on a nationwide basis was the Leona Helmsley story of leaving $12 million for her dog, Trouble. And what an appropriate day, especially for Leona Helmsley dog. But that really threw this into the limelight of media, I think. And Peggy, if you will, just talk to us a little bit about the history of Pet Trust and this area of estate planning and how it has become so prevalent in our society.
I love to talk about how this is evolving, and it really started in England way before it ever came across the ocean to the United States. But in the United States, our very first case that involved a trust for the benefit of pets was back in 1926, and it was in a Kentucky court. And in that court, they validated a trust on humane purposes that was created for the benefit of a pet. So that was really the very first time that pets were recognized as being potential beneficiaries of a trust. And historically, the problem with planning for our pets has been that our law still treats pets as property. So they look at a pet as no better than a table or a chair. And I can't leave money to a table, and I can't leave money to a chair. And so if I want to leave money to a pet, before the advent of pet trusts, the only thing I could do was leave money to a person for the benefit of a pet. And sometimes that was successful, but not always. And now the law has evolved in a way that all 50 states and the District of Columbia recognize trusts where the beneficiary is not a person, but instead a loved pet. And so that's really opened up the door for us to be able to create these fabulous plans that can protect our pets, not just in the event of our death, but also in the event of what happens if we become disabled during our lifetime. So I have a client right now who's been in the hospital on and off since September. She was in a rehab facility, and she has 12 birds and 3 dogs and a cat. And fortunately, she has a pet trust and the ability for her friends and designated pet caregivers to be able to provide for those pets while she's incapacitated.
Wow. You know, those of us in the animal welfare profession, you know, are so excited about this topic, getting exposure and becoming so popular and really in American culture. I cannot tell you the countless stories of all of us in animal welfare who have experienced someone passing, predeceasing their pets, and there really is no plan for them. And you know, it breaks your heart, as many things do in our profession. But you know, I'm just surprised by so many things. I mean, Kentucky in 1926, and you know, I guess they, you know, are a little bit more forward-thinking than just bourbon and basketball up there. But because it's so popular, and so much so that you've even published a book, All My Children Wear Fur Coats. So explain to us, if you will, why we should plan for our pets in the first place.
Well, I know, like you, many of you out there, your pets are your children. I don't have any two-legged children. I just have the four-legged variety. And it became clear to me that when I'm talking to my estate planning clients, they're planning for the people that they love. And within that definition of planning for those that we love, our pets are included. And because we know that our pets are never going to grow up, they're never going to get a job, they're never going to become independent, they're never going to leave our household like our children do, we're really tasked with the responsibility of making sure that we have a plan that protects them if something happens to us. And I am the mom to 6 dogs and 2 cats and 4 horses. And so it's very real to me, the idea of what would happen to them if something happened to me. And so when I talk to folks about this, I talk to them about it from a place of really understanding that it's a definite thing that we have to think about. And although we don't know the numbers exactly, it's estimated that 500,000, 500,000 love pets are euthanized annually in our country because their pet parents didn't have a plan. And all you have to do is go on Facebook for one day and you will understand that there are people out there consistently, can you help us? So-and-so is in the hospital, so-and-so has passed away. And we have these cats, we have these dogs, we have these horses. I got contacted the other day, we have this pig who needs a home. And although we're more than happy to help, at the same time, I want to say, get a plan. Let's have a plan for these pets so that we don't have to have these last-minute shout-outs for help, and then we don't really know where the pets are going to end up. And then on top of it, there's no resources to care for the pets.
You know, you bring up a really good point about, you know, basically our animals are our family, and I'm sure with many families, there are family members or friends that you really want, you know, your pet, which is probably the most vulnerable family member, you know, to go to. And again, we can talk about this offline, but we have run into different experiences where, you know, we knew the pet owner. You know, we just, because we knew them, we, you know, really knew that they would not want that pet to go to a particular person, like perhaps the next of kin, etc. They had the physical assets of their estate all tied up and everything, you know, the I's dotted, the T's crossed. But they really didn't have that plan, that specific plan for their pets. So in terms of estate plans, you know, let's say I have my estate plan. Do I need a separate plan for my pets?
So there's a couple of different ways you can approach it. You can incorporate your plan for your pet into your existing estate plan, or you can create a plan for your pet that kind of stands alone on its own for the benefit of your pet. And that's where organizations like yours, Joe, are coming up with these wonderful programs that offer opportunities for people to say, here's what I want to have happen to my pet. And so I encourage everybody, whether you have a plan for yourself, definitely get one for your pet, but I encourage everybody to get a plan for themselves as well. And yet we still know that 50% of Americans have no plan for themselves. And that's a conversation that I have on a daily basis. Is I get all these crisis calls from people who say, my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, they're in the hospital and there's no plan. What do we do? And my first question always is, yeah, but are there any pets? And what do we have to do about them first? You know, I figure the hospital will take care of the person, right? But we want to make sure the pets are taken care of.
So if you don't have a will, should you still create that pet plan?
Absolutely. And I'm pretty opinionated when it comes to how we should plan for our pets. Wills are probably not the best vehicle to plan for a pet. Trusts are a much better planning tool. And one of the complaints that we hear about wills on a frequent basis is wills are subject to probate. And people think probate is a 4-letter word. So we try to avoid probate if we can, but if we include our pets as part of our will, then we're forced into the probate process, and probate can be time-consuming, it can be costly, and it could be detrimental to your pet. I did have one client who, early in my pet planning career, this is many years ago now, convinced me to create a pet trust inside of his will, and unfortunately, it took 4 to 5 months before we were able to get somebody appointed on behalf of his estate in order to access the funds to care for his pets. Now, fortunately, he had a lovely group of neighbors who stepped in and took care of his cats while we were going through that process. But that's not always going to be the case. That was just a fortunate situation in that instance. So I really don't encourage people to use wills for planning for pets, but to take advantage of the pet trust statutes that we have available. And whether you include it in your own personal revocable trust or whether you do what I call a standalone pet trust, there's lots of ways to plan for pets, but trusts are the best.
Gotcha. I mean, this is invaluable information. And again, we can have conversations. Those of us who've been in, this life-saving profession for so long, Sean, myself, others, you wouldn't believe the horror stories that none of us would really assume it would happen. And I think the pet owners that love their animals would assume either. What happens when you don't have that, that plan in place. So when we talk about, let's say, life care facilities, and I'm thinking of one out in Texas, the Madeline Stevenson Life Care Center, that and other options for, let's say, my animals, what's the array of options when I can no longer take care of them?
So you mentioned the Stevenson Center out in Texas. That's one option, and they were one of the really early options that were developed for lifetime care for someone's pets. And then organizations around the country are starting to create and adopt these programs because people are realizing that it's become a real crisis, that we have to plan for our pets. So you'll talk more about the Pet Safe program in a moment, but these organizations for a financial commitment on behalf of your pet are willing to provide lifetime care for your pets. But there's lots of options for planning. And I kind of break mine into 3 categories. One option is what I call forever home, and that's people that might want their pets to remain in their own home and just have a pet caregiver, if you will, move into the home and take care of the pets. That's the option I want for myself. So if something were to happen to me, I have a designated pet caregiver that will move into my home, take care of my dogs, take care of my cats, take care of my horses, so that their life really doesn't change in any big way other than who's providing them with the daily love and care. They stay in their home. So I call that forever home. A second option is what I call forever family. And that's really kind of the program that you have, is the forever family program, where a pet would be rehomed with another family but would come with the resources or have some resources available for their lifetime care. I think it's unfair for us to ask anybody to take on the responsibility of our pets without a financial commitment that goes with it. Even my best girlfriend, she was like, oh, well, you'll take my horse, won't you? I go, yeah, if it comes with a check. Horses aren't cheap. My sister has 8 horses. I'm sure she would be willing to take on my horses, but 4 more horses, that's a big responsibility, and it wouldn't be fair for me to ask her to do that without making the financial commitment that goes with it. So first option, forever home. Second option is what I call forever family. And then the third option is what I call forever sanctuary. Because there are some animals and some pets that might not be suitable for staying at home or having another family, but need to reside more in a sanctuary environment, like a horse or like a pig or a sheep or some other type of animal, or maybe hard-to-home animals. The gentleman that I spoke of earlier, he had 5 cats. 4 of them were aged. They were over the age of 12, and we were able to place them in a sanctuary that only accepts senior cats. So that was perfect for them.
Wow, that's amazing. But we're going to get to a question and answer, a Q&A session tonight. But what I do want to do is mention a little bit about the Charleston Animal Society Pet Safe program. One is that it's a guaranteed acceptance program, meaning that, and most of you know at different times, particularly over the last year or so, couple of years, our facilities have not been able to keep up with the rapid growth in this community in terms of space, and we've been a critical overcapacity situation for much of that time. However, guaranteed acceptance means that we would accept your pet, your loved one, regardless of that. The other thing is that it's affordable. There's an upfront registration fee of $250, but then there's a fee of the $5,000 for your pet, your loved one, that wouldn't be paid until you decease, and that would either be through either your life insurance or other aspects of your estate. And the funds are clearly provide the proper nourishment, proper behavioral medical care, the proper environment for your pet while they're in our care until we can find that perfect home for your pet, your loved one. We would not keep that pet in a sheltering environment because, as nice as it may appear aesthetically, a cage is a cage is a cage, and our intent would be to place it in a home with a family, the right family for you. The last thing is that, when you enroll your animals, your pet, as Sean likes to say, and Sean built out this program, is that you're really reserving that parking spot. And think about it as, going to the beach or so, when we all know the traffic. What if you had that reserved parking spot? Should your pet predecease you and you get another pet, you still have that parking spot. You still have that space for that animal. And Sean is here, Natasha's here tonight to talk about, details and your specific situation. But with that, and I do want to, thank Peggy, and I'm going to thank Peggy again after we do some Q&A. We do these donor salons, and this is our support base. And they come out to these donor salons, but this is the heart and soul. All of you, you're the heart and soul of the organization. You're the ones that empower and enable those of us who work for the organization, whether we're paid staff or volunteers, to do the life-saving work you want to see happen. And with that, I'll open it up for Q&A to Peggy.
Of the 2 alternatives, which is a standalone pet trust or a wrap-up pet trust within my family trust, which we have, is there an advantage or disadvantage to doing one or the other, or is it 6 of one, half dozen of the other?
Well, I think there can be an advantage actually to doing the standalone pet trust, especially if you have assets that are designated to go directly to that trust in the event of your disability or at the time of your death, because it wouldn't get caught up in the full-blown administration of your family trust. one of the things that I explain to people when we talk about trust administration is it's not automatic. I mean, when you pass away or you become disabled, there's stuff to do. And you don't just snap your fingers and it's all done. And it's really a 3-step process when somebody passes away. The first step is to identify, gather, and bring all those assets together. The second step is to pay all of the creditors and the taxes that might be due. And then the third step is to fund the trusts that are set up for family, friends, and the benefit of our pets. Now, if we have a standalone pet trust, we have the advantage of not necessarily having to go through all of those other steps. We have those assets immediately available for the benefit of the pets. So I do like standalone pet trusts for that particular purpose.
So that leads me to a second and third question, I mean, quickly. My estate attorney here in Charleston that's all he does is estates. Are they familiar with pet trusts?
I would like to say that they are, but I certainly couldn't guarantee that. Pet trusts are relatively new in the history of the world, if you will. And I will tell you that there are some attorneys out there who know absolutely nothing about pet trusts. There are some attorneys who don't believe in pet trusts because they're not pet lovers and they don't necessarily think about planning for pets. I'm that person who, on my initial intake form, it says, do you have pets and what are the plans for them? So it really kind of has to be a person who's a little bit enlightened maybe and who might be a pet lover. I did have a client ask me once upon a time, I'm working with this other attorney, but they really don't know anything about horses. Do you think I should work with them if I'm planning for my pets? Of course, that's entirely up to them, but I'm going to know more about the questions to ask for somebody to plan for horses than maybe somebody who doesn't. And I always jokingly say when people ask, well, what should I look for in a pet planning attorney? I always say 5'6", brown hair, blonde eye, brown hair, trying to describe myself, but of course I'm only one person. And I would love to help every person in the world, and I have lectured to estate lawyers across the country, so I hope I'm doing a good job in educating people, but I couldn't speak to the fact whether all estate planning attorneys are educated in the pet trust world.
So I'll take the worst case scenario that my attorney has limited knowledge in this. How do I get him to familiarize himself with what should be possible? And I guess, before you answer that, it's sort of the same question. I'd like to take advantage of the Charleston Animal Society program. Would it be possible for you all to send out, you have all of our emails, here's how to start the process. Do you think you could do that?
Yes. And in fact, because these donor salons have been very popular, we're recording this so that it's going to be available so that we can distribute. And then we also have started to cover this issue, if you will, through our Carolina Tales magazine and everything. This is evolving, and I do have to give, props and shout outs to Sean Hawkins, who brought this program to the Animal Society. And, in basically about a month and a half, we'll be celebrating our 149th anniversary. The capacity of programs and services continues to evolve. And the short answer to your question is yes, and we plan to continue to grow this area of our overall life-saving program. And I'll tell you another reason why. I can't really go into details, but there's a situation right now going on in South Carolina. I mean, right now as we speak, that's unfolding. A gentleman in his 90s, avid animal lover, horse lover, and we have our horse that is native to South Carolina, the Carolina Marsh Tacky horse, that is always tinkering around the endangered species or not. But it's our horse. It's South Carolina's horse. Recently passed last fall, and I'm sure, I would assume knowing him, he probably had something else in mind for the disposition, of those horses that, he cared so much for. This really hits hard here at home. So we're going to be growing this program, evolving this program, and that's one of the reasons why we're recording it, make it much more available, and disseminate it.
How do you go about the process of finding a trustee to administer your pet trust if you were planning to be like the last of your family, so to speak?
So that's a really good question. Is who do we choose as a trustee to manage the trust funds? So if you're enrolled in a program like the Pet Safe program, obviously they're going to take care of the administration of those assets. If you're creating a standalone trust or a trust as part of your irrevocable living trust, you can always name family and friends. You can always choose professionals. And then I've taken it one step further. I actually created a not-for-profit organization that can act as pet trustee as a nonprofit organization. We're called Animal Care Trust USA and headquartered in my law office down in Florida, but we work on a nationwide basis for people who do not have other alternatives. Banks and trust companies, although they would love the opportunity to manage your money, they're really not that interested in managing your pets. And I've had that direct experience with some families that wanted to leave literally millions of dollars for the lifetime care of their pets. In fact, this one couple that wanted to leave 2 Manhattan apartments that were connected and lots of money to take care of the pets, but the trust companies really were not interested in the pets. They were really just interested in the money part of it. So yes, we created Animal Care Trust USA for the purpose of acting as pet trustee to provide that oversight that you might want for the people who are providing the day-to-day care for your pets. I always recommend you have at least 3 people, by the way, or 3 choices, so that if the first choice can't do it or the second choice can't do it, that you always have that third choice in line. And usually that third choice should be a professional or a corporate trustee. I will mention while we're looking for the next question that I do have books available. All My Children Wear Fur Coats, How to Leave a Legacy for Your Pet. I'm going to make a donation to the Charleston Animal Society for every book that's sold. I think Sean's going to buy all the ones that are left over because he wants them. But I also brought another book that I wrote, and it's a little in your face, but it's called 101 Ways to F Up Your Estate.
So when you set up your trust and you have your pets at that time, but if you don't pass away for a decade, 2, 3, or 4, and you have different pets at that time, but you still want them to be cared for, do you need to specify pet A, B, C, and when pet A and B pass away, and now you get pet D, E, and F, do you need to continue to update your trust so that it specifically states those particular pets, or can you just say for whichever pets we happen to have at that time, this trust is put aside for them?
I always define pets as any pet that I may own at the time of my disability or my death. And then I always encourage people to include what I call loved pet profiles, one for each pet, so that you can change those out on a regular basis as the faces change, because they do change over time. And I think that most of us believe that we're going to outlive the pets that we have now, and that may be true, but if you're a true pet lover, you're probably going to continuously have those new faces show up, and so you want to make sure that those are addressed as well. Always leaving those, I call them babysitter instructions, but they're the day-to-day how to care for my pet instructions. I call it a loved pet profile, but it details the information about your pet, not just the pet's name and age and breed, but what are its likes and dislikes, how do you feed it, what are its medical history that people might need to be aware of, what are its eccentricities. I mean, we have pets, some that are afraid of thunderstorms, some that are afraid of fireworks, some that are afraid of cats. It just depends, and you have to kind of tell the story of your pet so that the person who comes in behind you has that information to give your pet the best possible care.
That's right. I am so glad you asked that. I'm so glad you were really complete in your answer, Peggy, because so much information, or the animals that come into our care, the best information is the information that we can get from the owner, the person that has spent the most time with them. So these profiles are, just, a wonderful idea. Otherwise, we don't know much about that animal in terms of, when I say finding the right family, just like this, their characteristics, their quirks, those kinds of things. So if you have that kind of profile, that's great. It somewhat reminds me of microchipping and how we go about our lives and everything, and something changes about how to contact us. And, do we really, we get the change of address kit from the postal service or whatever. But what prompts us to think that we need to change the microchip in this animal that we love? You wouldn't believe the number of animals that come to us with microchips, but invalid phone number, invalid address. There's no way to trace, someone who actually owned that pet, much less, it's in our care. And we only have a short time to really, try to figure out, what this pet is like, what this animal is like, and it may not be what it normally is like in a sheltering environment, and then trying to find, the right home for it. So it's really about trying to find the right home for those animals that, you love so much.
That's such a good point, too, because we also have pets that need to stay together, that might be bonded. So we have to give that information. I remember one client who said, my cats must not stay together. She was absolutely clear about that. But then there are those of us that have, we have pairs of dogs that need to stay together because they were raised together and they love each other. It's just, it's like leaving babysitter instructions when, for anybody who does have two-legged kids, or if you've ever left your pet with a pet sitter, which I know you have, we don't just hand the pet over. We leave a notebook full of information. Here's our contact information. Here's every little thing you need to know about my pet. So we want to do that, and we want to keep that updated on a regular basis. I always say when we do our taxes every year, that's the best time to update things, review what you have. I encourage my clients to revisit their estate planning every 2 to 3 years, or anytime you have a significant change in your health or your financial circumstances. The national average for updating is 19.6 years. 19.6 years. I won't be here 20 years from now practicing law, probably. And yet my clients prove this out every single day. The last time they came to see me was, 2001. I'm like, really? But, we get busy and life happens. And we think that it's not that important, but the laws change. So I call it the 4 L's. Things change in your life, things change in the law, things change in your lawyer's experience. We get smarter and they change the laws. And then things change in your legacy, the way you want to leave assets for the people and the pets that you love.
I have a quick question. If you can give our guests some advice on how to approach people when they are wanting to ask if they'd be willing to serve as a trustee, as well as is there anything that they need to give the trustee of their estate to ensure continuity of care?
Oh, excellent question. So when we're talking about caring for pets, really we're breaking this up into a couple of different categories. We're going to have short-term pet caregivers, the people that might be able to step in on a moment's notice to provide care, who might not actually be the people who are going to provide the long-term care. So I talk about short-term pet caregivers, I talk about long-term pet caregivers, I talk about trustees, because that's a different role. And we don't necessarily want the same people who are the pet caregivers to be the people who are overseeing the money or the distribution of the assets. And then I've even created a concept that I call the pet care panel. So you might want to even go a step further and create a panel of people that you trust that wouldn't necessarily provide the day-to-day care, but that you want them checking in on your pets. So yes, I think you should always talk to people about the roles that they might have in your planning so that they're not surprised. They don't get a phone call one day that says, oh, hey, guess what? Joe named you as the pet caregiver for his 3 dogs and 5 cats and 2 snakes and his collection of gerbils. You know, that's not a phone call you want to surprise somebody with, right? I have created a pet trust for chinchillas. So, you know, somebody's going to get that call someday who says, hey, here's 10 chinchillas coming your way. I don't think that's a surprise that people want to have. And I think that results in disasters most of the time. So those people really need to know what their role is going to be, what they're expected to do, and then keep on top of that so that as the pets change and as people's circumstances change, that you're aware of that. Because if I choose Joe today, that might be a great decision today, but maybe 10 years from now, that's not the best decision. So we got to keep on top of that. And please don't assume that your family is going to step in and do that for you. As much as they might love you and profess to love your pets, you don't know what their circumstances are going to be at that moment. And I always pick on my husband in this regard. I love him dearly, and I know he loves our pets. But here's what I envision. I die. He goes to my funeral, stops off at the local Hitch and Post bar on the way home, and meets a lovely lady. We'll call her Bambi the Bimbo. And Bambi wants to live at the beach. She doesn't want to live on a farm with 4 horses and 6 dogs and 2 cats. And oh my God, the dog hair, and I'm allergic to cats. So I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm just saying he might fall for somebody who doesn't love animals the same way that I do. And his life could change, his circumstances could change, and I'm not going to take that risk that my animals are not going to be cared for in the way that I would want them to be cared for. So, sorry, Joe, love you, but there's a pet trust, and Bambi is not a beneficiary.
Peggy, can I ask one question too? Let's say, talking about circumstances that if you put this money aside and then you're gone, you're obviously you passed away, but then your pet passes away before the money is used, can you then will that, or can you forward that to a person, or how does that work?
Absolutely. You can leave the remainder beneficiary, if you will, as a person. I don't encourage people to name people as remainder beneficiaries for pet trusts. I would rather have them leave that money to a pet-oriented organization. I think people might have ill will towards your pet, or they may cause trouble. Ooh, no pun intended, but that's what happened in the Leona Helmsley case, is that her beneficiaries were not happy that there was $12 million set aside for the benefit of a dog, and they thought that amount should be reduced. So I don't want to encourage people to come forward and challenge the terms and conditions of a pet trust. I feel fairly confident that as long as the pet trust assets are being used for the benefit of the pet, if I name the Charleston Animal Society as the remainder beneficiary, you're not going to try to bust that trust during the lifetime of that pet. So I much prefer to name charitable organizations as remainder beneficiaries for pet trusts. So excellent question. Not people, not your nieces, nephews, next door neighbor, etc.
I've already done a living trust. Everything I have is in a living trust. And my little Roscoe scar is in a living trust. Now I'm thinking.
Because you picked Anna or what?
No. No, I have 4 trustees. So, and she's covered. I have 4 trustees, and I have money for my dogs in the trust, plus I've got 10 charities, 4 SPCA ones. But I'm thinking about everything what you said. Because I know a person that left a cat to somebody and left them all this money. to get rid of the cat, and so-and-so wasn't going to be happy. She promised the owner that she would make sure the cat, that was as long as she put the cat somewhere. In other words, she should get an animal trust.
Yes, so
I have a living trust.
a living trust,
You can, I had money put aside for my dogs with some people listed there. I should have a pet trust in there.
you should likely have a pet trust. So there are lots of ways to plan for pets. So I could simply say I'm going to leave my dog and $10,000 to my sister Ann. I have a sister Ann, by the way, too.
I'll have to work that.
Well, I mean, I'm just leaving this as an example, but Ann could accept that $10,000 and drop my dog off at the nearest shelter, right? And it has happened many, many, many times. But if I leave that same $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million to a pet trust where Ann is not the beneficiary, but my dogs are the beneficiary, then the trustee is charged with the responsibility of making sure that that trust is used for the benefit of those beneficiaries. So there's not a person that's running off with the use of your money, which is why I generally also recommend separating that pet caregiver role from the trustee role. She doesn't have to start from scratch. Okay, you don't have to start from scratch, but you would want to amend your trust or restate your trust in a way that now creates a sub-trust, if you will, for the benefit of the pets, a pet trust. So if you think of sub-trust as like drawers in a dresser, I can create a drawer for my pets, I can create a drawer for my husband, I can create a drawer for my niece and a drawer for my nephew. So I can create all these separate trusts for the benefit of each one of the people or pets that I want to provide for.
I have a trust, and my animals are 6 dogs and 2 cats. Have a certain amount of money that is dedicated to their care, and I'm, very interested in how to convert that to a professional organization. And in doing that, I know the trustee of the trust gets a certain fee to be my trustee for General Family Trust. Now, what kind of fees do these organizations get out of that, so I can figure that into how much I have to leave for my animals?
So every organization is probably going to have a different fee structure depending on what you choose. In terms of what Charleston Animal Society does is you leave a dollar amount for the benefit of your pets, and then once the pets were cared for, the remainder would go to the organization. So there wouldn't be an additional fee. Am I right, Joe?
Right.
I don't mean to speak out of turn
No,
for
that's
you.
right. No, that's right. And by registering your pet ahead of time, and you'd be talking with Sean or with Natasha about that, and this is what I get back to about finding the right family. When I say the right family, I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, but the right family that can care for your animals the way you would want them to be cared for. But we have to know this information up front. We need to know you, your animals, and the kind of environment that you're raising your animals in and that you would like for those animals to be placed in. But also, once they would come into us, into our care, God forbid, let's say, then, we want to minimize the time that they're in the sheltering environment. We can always transition through a foster home, but we do want to place them in that right family and that right home. And that family needs to have the means, to care for them as well.
Okay, what is the transition? So if I die, how does my animal trust people get notified? Is that the responsibility of the person who's my trustee for my estate?
You asked a very complex question, actually, and it's a great one, because depending on how you want your plan to unfold, if you have a professional trustee or even a family member trustee, and they're going to charge a fee, You should know what that is in advance. Corporate trustees have published rates that they charge. Usually they're in the 1.5%, 1.75% to 2.25%, depending on the size of the assets that are being managed. Some have minimum annual fees that they charge. But typically it's going to be family or friends that's going to notify your trustee initially, or even your short-term pet caregivers initially, before the professional trustee or your formal trustees get notified that now they have to step up and do something on your behalf.
Actually, this is a follow-up to the animals coming into the Charleston Animal Society. My Sable and Josie were to come in after I've passed. Do they go on to the adoption board?
Well, I think that's something that, you would work out with our staff, Natasha and Sean. They need to know about your animals, this love profile that Peggy was referring to. Because I think on the the Pet Safe program, we want to know more about your animals, and the more we know about your animals, and you know this, Lynn, so many of the stray animals, most of our animals that come to us are stray animals. We know absolutely nothing about them. We would know more about your animals through this. And that's much easier to try to find that right home, because it's so much easier to place an animal into the right home when we know more information about the animal. A number of times with stray animals coming into us where we don't have background information and we place them with a family, you're placing them with a family after that family has only got to know the animal on the adoption floor, let's say for 20, 30 minutes, and yet we imply this lifelong relationship to have with the animal. As humans, can you imagine, meeting someone at wherever, a bar or club or whatever for 20 or 30 minutes, and then you walk away in this lifelong relationship? It just doesn't work that way. So it's a kind of a bit of a complicated answer. As we evolve this program, I think we will evolve the practices and the protocols in it along with it. But the more we know about your animal ahead of time, the better we are going to be at finding the right family. And I would say, talk more with really Sean and Natasha about it, because I give all the props to Sean. Sean brought this program to the Animal Society, and we felt like we were at the capacity to embark on it.
And it's such a great program and so worthwhile. Sean and I actually worked on a similar program in Orlando when Sean was in Orlando before he came here to Charleston. And I'm so happy to see that organizations like yours are taking on this responsibility, because the numbers are humongous, right? We have not hundreds of thousands, but millions of animals passing through our animal shelters on an annual basis. And a lot of them are strays, and a lot of them are the result of irresponsible pet ownership. But we do want the ones that have the responsible pet owners to have the best opportunity to get forever families and to be placed, and to use the resources that you leave behind for them for their care, and then to support the organizations that do the good work.
So similar to my earlier question, but this time on the pet caregivers. I have wonderful short-term pet caregivers. I've got a great company. They have their 5-page instruction manual for my pets. It's great.
Yay.
But longer term, like, a rehab, break something in a 6-week type, are there organizations that provide that type of service, or the trustee help find someone, or even, nursing home care? We're going through that with family members now. So it's at the forefront of my brain. But for that, is that something the trustee would help locate caregivers, or do they really need to be identified in advance?
Well, they could be, but yes, depending on the qualifications of your trustee, they could. And I mentioned my client earlier who's been in the hospital in and out since September. We have her birds farmed out at the moment. We have her dogs staying with a temporary pet caregiver. We have her cat at a cat sanctuary, actually, while waiting for her to come home. Now, her story is not going to have a happy ending, unfortunately, and she is going to come home on hospice. But the good news is that we're going to be able to bring all the animals back home during those final days so that she can enjoy the end of her lifetime surrounded by her animals, but also knowing that they're going to be placed after her passing and consistent with her wishes. I happen to be your trustee, so I made sure that that happened. I can't say that that would necessarily be true for everybody, but there are organizations out there that can provide short-term care, Pet Sitters International. I'm working with Cornerstone Hospice organization right now. We were able to get a grant from an organization called Pets for the Elderly, so that we can help with some short-term rehabilitation pet care costs. And those are the kind of programs that are really starting to be recognized on a nationwide basis as being necessary. I don't know, some of you may have seen this on Facebook, but there was a gentleman who went into the hospital and there was this big to-do about the nurse who took care of him who took on the responsibility for his cat. And although I thought that was a lovely story, I was like, well, shame on him for not having a plan for that cat. So I'm a little cynical sometimes because I really want people to do their own planning for their pets and not expect nurses or strangers to step into those.
And if I could say, I mean, to your point, and this is a great point, Peggy, I mean, this area is one of the most desirable areas in the country for retirees. We know we have a large retiree population that make this their last stop, so to speak. And we all know we are continually encouraging folks and particularly those that are elderly to continue to adopt these loved ones and bring them into their lives. How many of us have heard our friends and our loved ones who may be elderly say that, well, I don't want to adopt another animal, I don't want another animal because I know that the animal will outlive me, I won't live that long. But there's a way that you can enjoy those years with the animal and ensure, good paths. So we have a responsibility, kind of coming back to your question, Lynn, we have a responsibility and an obligation, to our community as we are continuing to encourage folks in their elder years to bring these animals into their lives and into their homes and their hearts. To be there in a way should they, predecease their animal.
Yeah, don't stop adopting pets. It makes me so sad when my clients say to me, oh, I've had my last dog, it was just too sad when I lost the last one and I can't do that again. And I'm like, we all know how much they bring to our lives in terms of joy and happiness, and I can't imagine that. And it's very heartwarming to see people who are in a rehab situation and they just want to get home so that they can get back with their dog or their cat. Or their birds, or their horses, right?
Well, I can say this. I think I can really say this. Peggy, you have got a new home in Charleston.
Yay.
We need to get you back here. We're recording this.
Let me know when you need rain.
We're going to share it with our constituency. But this is so enlightening. It's been so enlightening for me. And thank you for coming up here, being here in person to share. Like I said, this is the heart and soul of the organization. And, just thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. So this is such an honor and an opportunity to come up here and to share with you. And this is my passion project and the thing that I love to talk about the most. So if you want to hear more, you can join me weekly too on my podcast. All my children wear fur coats.
Okay, thank you all.